Hello. This is to look at the question in terms of Edexcel Pearson, Unit 2, May 2012, summer 2012, paper 6EC02, like you can see here. What we're trying to do is just talk you through an exam question. It's the data question at the start, question 1A. So if you look here, you'll see this is the paper we're looking at. And in modeling it, I'm trying to kind of make sense of the mark scheme for you and how you can pick up your maximum marks as quickly as possible and using the mark scheme for that. You can look at the mark scheme, but sometimes it's often difficult to interpret for students. Right, so if we look at this first question, so just scrolling down, with reference to extract 1, explain the difference between real and nominal incomes. It's only 4 marks. So the first thing to be say is for 4 marks, you need to define what we mean by real income. So you might want to pause here and see if you can do that. This is what the answer is. Real income is the value after the effects of inflation has been removed. Now, to get that extra mark, you might be thinking about using some data or exemplifying. In this case, because it does say use the data, I would strongly urge you to do that. So if you look at here, extract 1, you can pause the button here and see, well, what would I use? What you should have used is real household disposable income falling by 0.8%. Now you can do this. You could just say C extract 1 line 1. So real income is the value after the effects of inflation has been removed. C extract 1 line 1. It's a little bit risky. You're saving yourself a bit of time. Maybe you want to save some space there to then go on to nominal income and come in to write in that in full. But if you were worried about time, moving on to the extra marks, the examiner may reward you just for doing that. But certainly you've got a prompt there to go back to guarantee that extra mark. So likewise, now if you could define nominal, pause the button again. And you'll see the answer is as shown. And then you'd want to use the extract to back that up. So again, pause the button to see what you quote here. And you can see here that this is what I've put down as an answer. Again, I could refer to the lines here. Okay, so that was answering that first question. If we look at now higher marks, so let's look at an 8-mark type question. And typically with an 8 mark, are you going to need to evaluate? Well, be careful, it might ask you to. So you can see the question here. Again, you might want to pause it, think about how you'd go about answering this. It does say reference to all the extracts. It'd be a good idea to print this paper off, which you can find if you Google Edexcel past papers. Okay, so let's see how we'd answer this one. Oh, you can just see here, by the way, an answer in full to how I'd go about answering that 4-marker. Okay, so having used maybe the pause button to look at what's in full at the top, did you need to evaluate that question? Well, I've said here, no. It's just knowledge, analysis, application, 8 marks. That's the same thing as talking about making a point, explaining that point, exemplifying that point. So you might see that me use this later on. So if we look at the question again, explain 2 possible causes. So saying explain, you don't need to evaluate, of falling real disposable income during 2010. So how many causes? It did say 2, so that's all you need to do. So think about where you're going to get the marks. 2 causes. For each cause you identify you're going to get 2 marks. So you need to think, well, what's the extra 2 marks for? And that's what it's for just explaining it, maybe making, again, use of data. So, what's the first cause? This is going to get you 2 marks. What do you think? Look at the question again. This is what I came up with. Rising unemployment. How did I know that? You can use the data. It does say, after all, with reference to extract. So what do you think? You could look at figure 1, 2010. Why have I not used that? It says, with reference to the extracts, falling unemployment during 2010. I think it's tempting to look at the extracts. So you can see figure here. Now, actually, this looks like unemployment's possibly falling, then going up, so it's a little bit unclear. And here, it looks like unemployment's pretty much staying constant. All right, maybe a kick up towards the end, but is that in 2011? So be a little bit careful with the data. It's not definitely always going to fit in. So I use the following. Rising unemployment means people have less money, as shown by the real household disposable income falling by 0.8% in 2010. Okay, I used that in 1A, in A1, but it's valid here, so it's fine. So what's our second point? Low union power is what I came up with. What made me think about that? Well, if you look at extract 1, I'd, after all, these questions are designed to help you, prompt you, stimulate you. So in A1, we'd already looked at this, and I might have been thinking, well, look, workers' pay, mainly driven by bonus payments in finance and business service sector. So most people's average earnings weren't particularly growing that rapidly, whilst inflation was outstripping that. So I kind of answered it already. So that's what I put. And here you can see the full answer without the gaps. So again, you might want to pause here to have a look at how you've got on. Okay, now you may want to yourself have a go at the other questions here. I've deliberately chosen as a start of the course not to look at this one in terms of the aggregate demand and aggregate supply diagram, but you might want to think about breaking this down as to a 12 marker. What sort of thing am I expected to do? So this is what I've got as a prompt here. Do I need to evaluate, and how much? Well, it does say assess. That's usually a good clue to evaluate. But how much? What's going to be split from those 12 marks? How many marks are going to go to evaluation? You need to look back at the question. Now look, it's got do a diagram. There's usually 4 marks for a diagram. Now you're not going to leave that diagram. You're going to need to explain it. Oh, the impact on price level, maybe 2 marks. Impact on output, maybe 2 marks. So that's now 8 marks, leaving 4 marks for evaluation. If you didn't catch that, I've written it up here. And again, you may want to pause here. Okay, so I've decided to look at a question which I thought was a bit more accessible for students starting the course. And we've got B3 with an asterisk there. With reference to the information and your own knowledge, so you don't have to use the data, but it's usually a good idea to do so. Examine 2 factors which might explain. Now, what does this word examine mean? Does that mean you should evaluate? And why the asterisk? The asterisk is there because essentially you've got to make sure your writing is really clear, well structured here. In particular, examiners find problems in having to second guess what students are writing. And it's here where maybe you're not going to get the extra 2 marks for an explanation. You might just get 1 mark there, or even possibly 0 marks, because it's just difficult to follow what you are trying to say. Certainly not a use of bullet points and lists is not recommended here. Examine, yep, it does mean test out something. If you imagine it, say that where you're being tested, you're being examined, aren't you? We're going to test out what's the case for you doing well, what's the case you're not going to achieve well in this question. So it does mean evaluate. And 12 marks, yeah, again, is pretty much the 8 plus 4e. This is not a guarantee though, but it is most likely to be the case. So you can break it down like I have suggested earlier on. We've got 2 points, 2 factors. We're going to explain each, 2 marks. And then we're going to evaluate each for 2 marks. So let's have a go at it. Give me one factor then that you think could cause rising unemployment. Again, you might want to pause here, have a go at it, look at the data, use your own knowledge. This is what I came up with. Decline in real incomes. That is a point. It's not explained though, so there's only 2 marks there. So how might you explain that? Again, you might want to pause here to have a go at that. Right, this is what I did. I use extract 1. So I can say that household incomes have fallen. People are spending less in shops. Sorry about that gap there. Forcing firms to lay off workers. However, so we've got point 2 marks, explain 2 marks, however 2e, and then that's it, 6 marks, half the marks earned. So what would you say is a however here? Again, you might want to pause at this point. This is what I said. Type of unemployment is cyclical. You may not have come across that. It's to do with the boom-bust cycle. So when the recovery kicks in, unemployment should go down. But just pointing out, it's a time issue. That unemployment might not be there for a long period of time. It may come down. In fact, there's bits of data which does suggest that, which we've looked at earlier. So what would your other point be? Oh, and this is interesting. Yeah, maybe the simple evaluative point you've made, you might be concerned that's not convincing. So it might be an idea sometimes to leave a gap, carry on, and then you can always come back and say, right, can I have another go at an evaluative point that might be a bit more effective? Or a safe bet, if you are able to confidently put down a second evaluative point, it might be worth you doing this, just to make sure you do nail the evaluative marks. And there you can see my second evaluative point. So what's the second factor causing unemployment? Again, you might want to pause here, come up with your own answer. Perhaps have a go at structuring your response in full. So what's the factor? 2 marks. How are you going to explain that? Perhaps use the data, 2 marks. Can you evaluate 1? So it's just 2e if it's an evaluative point. We don't have to go in depth on that. And maybe another evaluative point. So you might want to pause here before seeing the answer. This is what I came up with. Global recession. Got to be a bit careful. I'm really focusing on here is a lack of exports. So there's 2 marks there. I've explained it. Sorry, I have 2 marks. My point is basically a fall in demand for UK exports. And now I've explained workers in these industries, such as the UK car firms like Jaguar in the Birmingham in the Midlands, BMW, Mini, let's say in Oxford, we may have this economic knowledge. They did mothball, temporarily close their factories, and there was the laying off of workers. This is why it's always good to be reading around economics, to be reading the newspapers, so you can just draw on this own knowledge. This is where we want to reward students to show that they've got that knowledge. But a shorter version of this would be a second factor is a lack of demand for UK exports causing UK firms to lay off workers. That would most probably be just enough. How do you evaluate that though? Can you draw on your own knowledge? Again, you may want to pause here. This is what I came up with. Something that gets well drilled into students is that exports only make up a small proportion of our aggregate demand. Consumption's the biggest one by far. Some people say above 60%. Investment by expenditure by private firms and government expenditure. In fact, that's not technically quite correct here. It's exports minus imports is a small proportion of our national income. So, would that have got 2e? I think it would. But what's another 2e? So this is what I've got here. You may be aware, again, from your economic reading, that we export very successfully. Jaguar does as a British company to India and China. That's where most cars get exported to, and there's rapid growth. you may have heard in the news about Jaguar hiring and employing more workers. So that kind of current knowledge will get rewarded in the exams. It doesn't have to be written in great depth, but that's what you're looking at. And this is the full response for 8 marks. Okay, so we're about sort of a quarter of an hour into this presentation. Again, you may want to pause here. You'll see, in fact, this was 12 marks, so I've gone a little bit over the top here. I've got 8 marks for that bit, 8 marks for that bit. That in effect would work out 16 out of 12. You're not going to get there. You'd get 12 out of 12. So again, you might want to have a go at rewriting this and making it more shorter, removing the 2 E's, and you'd get your 12 out of 12. As I say, we're about a quarter of an hour through this. So I'm going to stop there, and we will look at a separate video for how we go about answering 30 marks, and we will also be producing for you an Edexcel Unit 1 guide. I think the biggest tip I could say, having looked at this Unit 2, is be careful with evaluation in Unit 1. At AS level, students find it difficult to be critically thinking about the national economy. So that kind of critical thought, that kind of critical awareness of what's the bigger picture, what are the time lags, that gets rewarded quite easily because it's tricky for students to grasp that on Unit 2. Unit 1 is a little bit more straightforward, the evaluation. You don't tend to get these automatic 2E rewards. It's usually picking up a 1 evaluative mark and then you needing to develop it to get the other evaluative mark. But for more of that, look at our Edexcel Unit 1 Model Answer Modeling Response. That's it. Thank you.